Hi Reddit, I'm Harper Lane, 26, living in this cozy colonial in Ohio that my grandma left me when she passed. The house is a character in itself. Every corner has a story. Ceramic frogs line the windowsills, each one with its own expression, all silently judging me as I walk past. Mr. Whiskers, my gray tabby with a permanent scowl, follows me everywhere and glares like I personally ruined his entire existence. Beans, my golden retriever, is the polar opposite, a drooling, snoring mess who can somehow inhale entire shoes and then look at me like it was an accident. Life around here is quiet, predictable, and mostly peaceful. Mostly. I have always been the responsible one in my family. While my younger brother Dylan spent every spare cent of his college fund on concert tickets, overpriced sneakers, and skateboarding gear that defied all laws of physics, I was the one footing bills, helping my parents patch holes in their finances, and pretending that their passive-aggressive guilt trips about how I had it easy didn't sting. Spoiler, it stung. A lot. But I tolerated it because that's what responsible people do, right? 3 years ago, I met Caleb. The kind of man you think only exists in movies, not in the bookstore down the street in Ohio. I was browsing in the poetry section, killing time between work shifts, when I noticed him standing there, holding a book like he actually knew what he was reading. Tall, messy mop of brown hair that looked like it had a life of its own, eyes crinkled at the corners from some inner joke only he knew. I could not resist. I leaned over and said, trying to learn to cry on cue, or just showing off. He looked at me for a second, then laughed, and not a polite for etiquette laugh, but a deep, warm, contagious laugh that made the bell above the store door chime like it was celebrating my new favorite sound. He grabbed a random poetry book off the shelf, flipped it open, and said, maybe this will make you laugh or cry. Depends on your taste in sarcasm. That was it. That was all it took. Hooked. A week later, he showed up at my apartment with wildflowers, not roses, no, that would have been too predictable. Dandelions, daisies, the kind of flowers you see on the side of the road that somehow feel personal when someone picks them for you. He somehow also managed to make pancakes shaped like tiny hearts, one of which accidentally resembled a burnt little dog. That was Caleb, romantic, absurdly goofy, and completely unpredictable in the best way possible. We started dating, fell in love, and within 2 years, we were engaged. Life was sweet, even with Mr. Whiskers' constant judgmental stares and Bean's occasional shoe disappearances. Everything changed one night that I will never forget. The kind of night that sears itself into your memory like a hot iron on soft fabric. It was 2:47 in the morning. I was wrapped in a blanket, lying on the couch, scrolling TikTok, listening to Bean snore like a truck trying to reverse in a driveway, and feeling Mr. Whiskers' baleful glare bore into my soul from the armchair. Then I heard it, tires crunching against the gravel of my driveway. My stomach flipped over in a way that was equal parts panic and foreboding. I peeped through the blinds and froze. Caleb's truck was parked outside. Not that this would have been unusual. He often left it here, but the seat was empty on the driver's side. He was sitting in the passenger seat, pale as a sheet, looking like a man who had just been told to wrestle a bear using only a spatula. The driver of the truck, someone I had never seen before in my life, was a woman in a black leather jacket, with long dark hair cascading down her back and boots that probably deserved their own Instagram account. They were whispering, leaning into each other in a way that made my chest tighten like someone had slammed it in a door. Caleb noticed me at the window, and I watched the color drain from his face. Then the woman opened the trunk, revealing a heavy black duffel bag. My brain ran wild. My suburban murder mystery instinct screamed. This could be anything. A body. My grandma's long-lost crystal collection. A cache of cash. Maybe all three. I stepped onto the porch, heart hammering, sarcasm bracing me like armor. Hi. Need a hand with whatever that is. I kept my voice level, but inside, I was a hurricane of confusion, suspicion, and rising panic. The woman smirked, her eyes sharp, calculating, familiar in a way I couldn't yet place. Caleb's mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came. Then, almost like a switch flipped in my brain, I noticed her left hand. There it was, a tattoo identical to one I had seen in Caleb's high school yearbook, a tiny design on his first love's wrist. My stomach sank. Every whisper, every pale face, every nervous glance suddenly made sense in the cruelest, most humiliating way. I realized the truth before he could speak. The woman and Caleb were tangled in something from the past, something that had never fully ended. My fiancé, the man I trusted with my heart, my life, my future, had been carrying around a ghost. A ghost that had returned to stake a claim, even in our supposed perfect life. Everything I thought I knew about my love story, about the careful little life we had built, felt like it was crumbling in slow motion. My sarcasm didn't protect me this time, didn't make me feel clever or brave. I just stood there, frozen, watching the two of them, the black leather jacket and the messy mop of brown hair, like a scene out of a movie I was never meant to be in. She was his first love, the one he never fully stopped thinking about. The next morning, I woke up to the faint smell of burnt coffee and something suspiciously sweet that immediately screamed Caleb's pancake disaster. I rubbed my eyes, trying to reconcile the nightmare of last night with the normalcy of morning light spilling across the living room. Beans was already awake, tail thumping against the hardwood floor like a metronome on speed, sniffing at every corner with purpose. Mr. Whiskers, as expected, had chosen his throne on the windowsill, eyes narrowed in eternal judgment. I shuffled into the kitchen, and the scene that greeted me looked like a domestic apocalypse. Caleb was hunched over the stove, hair sticking out at all angles as if he had wrestled a small tornado in his sleep, eyes wide and panicked. His hands gripped a spatula as though it were a live grenade, and a pancake sat half stuck to the ceiling, a sticky, golden brown abstract art piece mocking all my attempts at composure. On the floor, the black duffel bag from the night before sat ominously like a monolith of secrets and beans. In a sudden burst of Olympic-level enthusiasm, lunged at it and tried to drag it across the kitchen as if auditioning for an action movie stunt. The bag barely budged, but Beans was undeterred, grunting and straining, and I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. Caleb froze when he saw me, face draining of color, and I caught every awkward nuance, shoulders tensing, eyes flicking between the mess on the ceiling, the duffel bag, and the dog wrestling with it. He muttered something about explaining, though his voice wavered under the weight of every absurd and catastrophic moment that had unfolded since last night. I tried to steady my breathing as Mr. Whiskers hissed from his perch, tail flicking furiously, clearly assessing whether I was about to explode into rage or laughter. I realized both were equally likely. The explanation came out in fits, tangled with flower-covered panic. Caleb admitted that the woman, Selena, was his high school sweetheart. She was 27, had resurfaced after being abandoned by her ex-husband, and found herself in a financial catastrophe that apparently involved mountains of debt, legal entanglements, and an alarming amount of cash. The duffel bag contained her money, which Caleb had been helping recover for her. He hadn't told me because he didn't know how, because he feared worrying me, and because in true Caleb fashion, chaos seemed to follow him like a loyal shadow. My brain was doing somersaults. My fiancé, the man who could burn a pancake into the shape of a tiny dog with a straight face, had been secretly navigating a decade-old love story tangled with thousands of dollars in hidden debts. I felt like I was trapped inside some bizarre hybrid of romantic comedy and thriller, with a sprinkling of domestic absurdity courtesy of a golden retriever and a judgmental gray cat. Beans finally surrendered, flopping on top of the duffel bag in a heap of exhausted triumph, while Mr. Whiskers leapt down and stalked toward Caleb, delivering a glare that could have killed a small horse. The smell of burnt sugar, coffee, and tension filled the kitchen. Caleb, hands sticky with pancake batter, explained every convoluted step he had taken over the past week, meeting Selena in secret, negotiating with her ex-husband, and trying to untangle the financial mess without dragging me into a whirlwind of legal and emotional chaos. Every word made me want to roll my eyes and sigh in disbelief, but I couldn't help the small, reluctant laugh that escaped. This was Caleb, the man who turned breakfast into a hazard zone, who tripped over his own emotions as expertly as he tripped over Bean's tail, who somehow, miraculously, made even this complete betrayal feel absurdly, frustratingly human. I watched him attempt to salvage the pancake apocalypse on the ceiling while simultaneously wrangling an oversized duffel bag and soothing a dog who had mistaken it for a chew toy. Every movement was chaos incarnate, yet somehow, beneath the panic and flower-coated hands, there was sincerity. He hadn't lied to hurt me. He had lied because he had tried to protect me from a mess that was part emotional history, part financial disaster, and wholly incomprehensible. The whole scene could have been tragic, yet it was hilariously, painfully Caleb, a man who somehow managed to be heroic, foolish, and utterly endearing all at once. I sighed, part frustration, part disbelief, part reluctant admiration. Beans finally collapsed, defeated by gravity or pride, and Mr. Whiskers resumed his perch, tail flicking with a smugness only a cat could achieve. And I thought, not for the first time, that loving Caleb was a full-time job with zero hazard pay. Here was the man who had taught me to laugh at life's little disasters, now tangled in a web of past love, money, and midnight duffel bags, standing in the middle of my kitchen with a pancake on the ceiling and desperation in his eyes. This was not the quiet, predictable life I had envisioned, but somehow it was perfectly, inexorably Caleb. Only Caleb. A week later, it felt like Selena had developed a sixth sense for my location. She started appearing everywhere: the grocery store, the library, even that little coffee shop I frequented when I wanted to hide from the world with my laptop and overpriced lattes. I could almost set my watch by her appearances, which meant Caleb reacted in a predictable yet endlessly entertaining way. Every time his eyes landed on her, he froze like a deer caught in the headlights, body stiff, mouth slightly open, and I could almost hear cartoon birds chirping nervously above his head, as if the universe itself was giving him a soundtrack for panic. One particular morning, I was carefully evaluating the crust-to-softness ratio of a sourdough loaf, a mundane ritual that grounded me in what little normalcy remained. Beans, however, had his own agenda. As if channeling a Home Alone montage, he barreled through Selena's tote bag like it was the finish line of a marathon. Receipts, a half-eaten granola bar, and what appeared to be a tiny, stressed-out succulent launched into the air in perfect slow-motion chaos. I couldn't stop laughing loud, unrestrained, entirely inappropriate laughter, while Selena flailed, attempting to catch the airborne mess, muttering something about boundaries, responsibility, and the audacity of dogs in general. Caleb hovered nearby, stiff as a board, muttering what sounded like apologies under his breath, but I knew he wasn't really talking. He was frozen in that perfect storm of horror, guilt, and helplessness, the kind of expression that makes people either cry with sympathy or laugh because it's so absurd. Mr. Whiskers, of course, had somehow appeared on a nearby shelf, tail flicking and eyes narrowed in judgment, silently narrating this unfolding calamity like it was the worst soap opera he had ever witnessed. Other shoppers watched in varying degrees of horror and confusion. A grandmother with a cart full of zucchini stared at me, laughing as I tried to compose myself while being sprawled triumphantly over the scattered debris of Selena's tote. A teenage girl whispered to her friend, pointing at Caleb, who looked like he had just realized he might not survive grocery shopping ever again. I felt a strange thrill, a combination of vindication, absurdity, and the sheer ridiculousness of life when you share it with people like Caleb and pets like Beans and Mr. Whiskers. Eventually, we managed to gather ourselves, pushing the cart out of the store and navigating the parking lot chaos with Beans weaving expertly between our legs, practically performing a victory lap. I couldn't resist giving Caleb one last jab, nudging him with my elbow and murmuring about how his ex was practically taking over our lives and how we should consider charging her rent for all the uninvited appearances. Beans barked in agreement, running circles around the cart as if endorsing the suggestion with canine authority, while Mr. Whisker sat on the car roof, casting us his most disapproving meow as if to remind us that humans were fundamentally flawed and should be kept in check. Caleb muttered apologies under his breath, and I realized, sometimes chaos is your best ally. Things really hit the fan when I discovered that Caleb had secretly been lending Selena money for months, without telling me a single word. I found out when a mysterious text popped up on my phone. "Thanks for your help, Caleb." My blood pressure skyrocketed. The words blurred before my eyes as a rush of disbelief, betrayal, and absolute fury collided in my chest. Without thinking, I stormed into the kitchen, spatula in hand like a medieval sword, ready for a confrontation of epic proportions. Beans, sensing the tension, leapt onto my lap like a furry bodyguard, eyes wide and tail wagging with deadly seriousness, while Mr. Whiskers perched on the counter, tail flicking and eyes narrowed, clearly preparing to deliver a scathing judgment should I lose composure entirely. "You could have told me," I shouted, flipping slightly burnt pancakes with more force than necessary, batter splattering onto the counter and floor. Caleb, standing there with pancake batter streaked across his shirt and hair sticking out in every direction, looked like a deer who had just realized he wandered into a wolf enclosure. Words tumbled from his mouth in a panicked jumble, punctuated by the clatter of the spatula slipping from his greasy hands, bouncing off the floor and narrowly missing Bean's snout. As he gestured wildly, one pancake, perfectly airborne and horrifyingly sticky, flew across the kitchen and landed on top of Bean's head. Beans yelped, bolted off my lap, and started spinning in circles with the pancake wobbling precariously like some kind of culinary hat, knocking over a mug and leaving a trail of syrup like a sticky comet across the hardwood. Mr. Whiskers hissed in disgust, gave a disdainful swipe at the nearest countertop object, and leapt to safety, clearly unimpressed with the chaos below, as though we were all amateurs fumbling through some badly choreographed performance. Caleb scrambled to grab the spatula again, slipping on a rogue puddle of syrup I hadn't noticed from breakfast earlier. He flailed, collided with the edge of the fridge, and almost toppled over entirely, clutching at the air for balance while I could barely breathe through laughter. The absurdity of it all was staggering. My fiancé, the man I loved, teetering on the edge of collapse over secret loans to his ex, while my pets orchestrated a kitchen performance worthy of a circus. I couldn't stop laughing, even as I waved my spatula like a victorious general over the battlefield of spilled batter and syrup, Beans barking in solidarity as if he understood the gravity of financial deception combined with physical comedy. Syrup dripped from every surface, floors were sticky, countertops were smeared, and Caleb's panicked face was a masterpiece of guilt and confusion. Every attempt to explain himself only made the situation more absurd, each gesture sending rogue pancakes flying, each exasperated sigh punctuated by my laughter. Chaos ruled the kitchen entirely, syrup smeared across cabinets and tile, pancakes stuck to walls and ceiling in stubborn defiance of gravity. Beans chased the spatula like a wild animal possessed by slapstick karma, and Caleb tried to regain some semblance of dignity while failing spectacularly. I stood in the middle of it all, spatula in hand, laughing so hard I was crying, realizing that the life I had thought of as normal had transformed into something unrecognizable, a surreal, sticky, hysterical combination of secret loans, romantic entanglements, and domestic mayhem. Chaos ensued, syrup spilled, Beans chased the spatula around the kitchen, and I realized my life had become a surreal blend of financial intrigue and slapstick comedy. By the third week, I realized that I had to take control before my life turned into a non-stop sequel of awkward encounters, surprise duffel bags, and uninvited financial chaos. I decided to organize what I dramatically dubbed a family intervention at my house. Caleb, Selena, my parents, Beans, and of course, Mr. Whiskers, who had already claimed his position on the back of the couch like a tiny, furry judge ready to pass sentence on everyone's bad behavior. I spent the afternoon preparing for maximum impact. Snacks were arranged with military precision, cheese cubes stacked just so, crackers in neat little rows, and a fruit platter that looked dangerously like it belonged in a Pinterest board about perfection. Drinks were chilled and ready, strategically placed on coasters to avoid disaster, and I even positioned a water bucket behind the couch for dramatic effect, just in case. Caleb nervously adjusted his tie, muttering, "Harper, are you sure about this?" I fixed him with my best death glare. Beans barked once with the kind of enthusiastic approval only a golden retriever could muster, and I knew the answer was yes, absolutely sure. When Selena arrived, she entered like a practiced performer, rolling in with her charm offensive fully activated. Sweet smiles, well-rehearsed tales of financial struggles, subtle implications of how generous Caleb had been, the whole package delivered with that confident, infuriating ease that made me want to pull my hair out and laugh simultaneously. My parents were trying to maintain polite expressions, clearly amused and slightly bewildered by the domestic soap opera unfolding in their daughter's living room. Caleb looked like a trapped puppy, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot, unable to intervene without further escalating the chaos. Mr. Whiskers, ever the dramatic presence, hissed once for maximum effect, tail flicking, sending the clear message that someone was about to face judgment. I couldn't hold back. Selena began recounting her ex-husband's negligence, hands flailing as she painted the most tragic, manipulative picture when I gave the water bucket a subtle nudge with my foot. The world slowed as it tipped over, water rushing toward the carefully arranged throw pillows in a perfect, cinematic arc. Selena slipped, arms flailing like a cartoon character caught in a hurricane, and landed sprawled, soaked, across my pillows with a dramatic thud. Beans barked triumphantly, prancing around her in what could only be described as victory choreography, while Mr. Whiskers leapt from the couch to give me the most approving look I had ever seen, clearly signaling that justice, long overdue, had been served. Caleb, drenched with guilt and likely a splash of bucket water, stammered apologies while attempting to stifle laughter, a surreal combination of horror and amusement on his face. My parents, already on the brink of hysterics, now laughed so hard they nearly toppled over their cheese platter, a symphony of human folly echoing in my living room. I watched all of it, the chaos, the wet clothes, the embarrassed glances, the triumphant dog, the judgmental cat, and realized something profound. I didn't need to compete with Selena, didn't need to manipulate situations or hold back my voice. I didn't need to explain or negotiate the absurdity of life. I just needed to stand my ground, protect my home, and embrace the chaos with humor as my weapon. 3 months later, life had finally settled into what I could only call a controlled chaos, a delicate equilibrium where unpredictability was expected and somehow comforting once you'd survived the full spectrum of drama. The kitchen still smelled faintly of burnt pancakes on most mornings, evidence of Caleb's alarming consistency in turning breakfast into abstract art, syrup smeared across plates in patterns that defied explanation or gravity. Beans had established himself as the undisputed ruler of my shoe collection, dragging flip-flops, sneakers, and the occasional slipper around the living room like he was curating some avant-garde pet exhibit. Mr. Whiskers, naturally, remained perched on the highest shelf available, tail flicking with judgmental precision as he silently evaluated the life choices of everyone in the house, with Caleb receiving particularly harsh scrutiny. Financial chaos had been resolved. Selena's mess was no longer a looming shadow. Her ex-husband had been dealt with, and the threats of hidden debts and surprise bills evaporated into the past. Caleb had proven himself not just through grand gestures, but through the everyday absurdities that made living with him an exercise in patience, laughter, and occasional exasperation. One afternoon, we were in the backyard as Caleb tried to hang string lights across the patio. In true fashion, he accidentally set off the sprinkler system, drenching himself head to toe, soaking Beans mid-chase, and even catching Mr. Whiskers, who hissed, shrieked, and bolted for the safety of the porch. We collapsed into the grass, laughing so hard that our sides ached, realizing that disasters had woven themselves into the very fabric of our love story, making it ours in the most chaotic, beautiful way. The disaster-prone mornings inspired me to start a small pet accessory business, fueled by Bean's boundless energy and Mr. Whiskers' unflinching regal judgment. I poured creativity, sarcasm, and just a hint of revenge into every design: squeaky chew toys, cat towers that threatened to touch the ceiling, dog beds shaped like miniature couches, and even pancake-shaped dog toys that served as a permanent nod to Caleb's kitchen calamities. One afternoon, my parents visited, eyes widening at the living room transformed into a showroom of pet-induced chaos, while Caleb proudly demonstrated how to launch a squeaky toy from the couch with perfect comedic timing. Looking back, I realized that love isn't about perfection. It's not about flawless mornings, immaculate furniture, or avoiding embarrassment. It's about surviving chaos together, laughing at absurdity, and celebrating victories that seem trivial but feel monumental in the moment, like Beans letting me keep one shoe intact or Mr. Whiskers giving the slightest nod of approval. Every spilled coffee, every soggy throw pillow, every pancake disaster and rogue duffel bag had become part of our story. Messy, hilarious, unpredictable, and entirely ours. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt balanced, even if it was unconventional. It was a life where chaos wasn't the enemy, but the backdrop for love, laughter, and growth. Caleb still burned pancakes, Beans still wreaked havoc, and Mr. Whiskers still judged, but somehow it all felt like home. I had learned that surviving together, embracing the ridiculous, and finding humor in the unmanageable moments was more valuable than any neat, picture-perfect existence. So, to anyone reading this, thank you for listening to our story: the burnt breakfasts, the drenched throw pillows, the duffel bags that haunted midnight, and the pets who ruled our lives. Life is messy, love is chaotic, and the best stories are the ones where you survive the absurd together. This is ours in all its flawed, hilarious, chaotic glory. And if you take anything away from it, let it be this: laugh at the disaster, embrace the chaos, and never underestimate the power of a well-timed dog bark or a cat's scornful glare. Our lives are ours to make beautiful, even when they are perfectly imperfect. Thank you for listening.